This week has been Steam Rhythm Fest, which is delightful for me because I adore a rhythm action game and can't say no to most of them. I picked 20 upcoming games, 19 of which have never been featured on this channel before, and almost all of the games in this video have ended up on my wish list, so I wanted to talk about them all, kicking off with Rift of the Necrodancer. And yes, it's the same world as the Necrodancer Crypt variety, but this is a 3-lane rhythm action game, and monsters come down towards you on the beat of the song that you're playing. The beauty behind this is that some of the monsters have different colours which will signify how many hits they need to take before they're defeated, and depending on their direction and the type of enemy that's coming towards you will depend on whether they need like multiple hits, or whether they'll change lane in between hits, or whether they'll run all the way back and then charge back towards you. It's really engrossing, and so whilst it might look like a quite simple game, I guess, on the surface of it, there's excellent graphics, the soundtrack is top notch, as was Crypt of the Necrodancer, but this plays exceptionally well, and a few games that I've bought have this kind of enemies coming down tracks towards you that you need to kind of hit on the beat. This one already feels like probably the most polished version of that type of game. Next up is Beat Block, and this was a revelation for me. You play as a central little smiley face in the centre of the screen with a bat that will twist around like your analog stick, very much like Guitar Man, if you remember that on the PS2, but other games have done this too. And you're deflecting, mostly, all of the different blocks that are flying towards you. But not only that, you'll have fuzzy blocks and rings that will fly in towards you, and you'll need to press a button, and quite often that's to the kick drum of the song. And then on the harder modes, not everything has to be hit with your shield. Instead, there are ones that you have to slide your shield into it to spank it out of the way. And getting your head around switching from beating something and blocking it to spanking it out of the way of a slide, as well as tapping things, really was like a pat your head, rub your tummy moment. But I was loving this game, and I'd never heard of it before. It's on my wish list, day one for me. Next up is Polylylyrhythm, and this is a game that explores polyrhythms where you need to control each polyrhythm on separate keys and constantly reconfigure your brain to juggle multiple beats going on all at the same time that will eventually come back round to be synchronised again. So the idea behind this is that a polyrhythm is where you've got multiple length or beats in a bar that will eventually come back round and rejoin themselves. So you might have something that's got 5 beats in a bar of music and something that's got 4 beats in a bar of music, and eventually, if they play them enough, they'll come back round into synchronisation, but they'll work themselves away and then come back again. And the whole rhythm action game is built around this concept, and it will keep flicking different polyrhythmic beats and putting them side by side, and oh my god, this was another pat my head, rub my tummy moment, because you're having to constantly reconfigure your brain about which rhythm is doing what. It's such a simple concept, it's really well put together, and I believe this is going to be a free game when it comes out. So no brainer, wishlist this, grab it, but it will do like a brain scramble on you for the best reasons possible. The next game on this list is the only game that I previewed previously back in 2021, and I'm surprised it's still not out. It's Turtoa Global Rhythm. And I dived into this demo to see if it's actually made any progress, and it's exactly the same as it was in 2021. But I still think this game has the potential to be absolutely superb. You play as a turtle busy bringing along various different cultures and rhythms and types of music to unite the world, and you do this on a 6 or 4 or 8 beat or bar chart like formula as dragons and turtles kind of flow down a stream. This game is tricky. It does still lag and have some performance issues slightly if you've got lots of things going on, but the soundtrack is diverse and rich and really well put together. Most of the music in this game I would personally buy. It's a mixture of like different worldly cultures with a bit of new age, a bit of like reggae and ska thrown in there. It's all over the place, but in the best way. And the rhythm tracks in this game work really well. So yeah, I don't know why this is taking so long, this game. I'm assuming it's because it's a solo designed thing. It's just something that's clicking away in the background. I can't wait to buy it. Get it out there, maybe on early access if not all the tracks are ready yet. The game next up is Rhythm Retro Premium Edition. And this took me a while to get used to, and I really love what they're doing with this game. It's a 4-track lane rhythm game with loads and loads of chiptune music flying in, and it evokes that 90s arcade Dance Dance Revolution style of aesthetic, because you've got the really over the top like next track, star, let's play, all like going on everywhere. It's really over the top and hyper arcadey in circa 1998, which I love, but there's something not quite right here yet with the way how the audio synchronization clicks up, and that's because it doesn't feel, all of the different ways that you can adjust it don't quite match exactly how my lag worked with my PC, so I always felt like the music and what I was pressing was slightly out of sync. If that could be corrected, this will be an absolute blast of a game, and I'd recommend it to any DDR fans from back in the 90s. I know we all exist somewhere. Next up, and it's a slight change of pace, is Mound of Music, and this is a visual novel game smashed up with a rhythm action game and a slight puzzle memory game too. And the idea behind this is that the world has come to an end, but there's still some people wandering around, and you're trying to bring back humanity through music and heal yourself and your soul and the world around you. Now, this takes place from a narrative standpoint and like lots and lots of conversations, but then you'll move into a memory game where pieces of music will play and you need to do like a Simon Says to follow the star notes on the sky and kind of go, aha. And that will take you into a 7-track rhythm game where little lights will come up from the bottom of the screen, a bit like piano scroll apps, for you to then type on and hit the notes on the piano scroll. It played really well. I did get slightly confused because sometimes the lights as they come up don't always feel obvious to you, but it changed slightly depending on the backdrop of what was going on. So long as that visual fidelity continues on, really well put together story. I was intrigued by its poetic nature, and yeah, I'm going to be keeping this one very much on my wish list and looking forward to picking it up when it comes out later this year. The next game is W.A.S.D. Quartet, and this was a really short demo, but it left a really big impression. And it's because you play as W.A.S.D. or variants of it on your keyboard to, in the demo, strum the guitar and sing songs. But as you hit things on each kind of beat of the bar, it would start building up a song, and then in would come the bass, and then in would come the drums, and it just seemed like a really cool jamming session. And apparently in the full game it's going to have a kind of proper narrative that walks you through playing music with robots and trying to again get your humanity back. Seems to be a theme this year in Steam Rhythm Fest. But yeah, it felt cute. I really liked the interplay of it, and I was surprised at how just a few chords and a few notes you could really like change the feeling of a song quite quickly and easily, and there was a lot to play with very little. Next up is Blink and Die Replay, and this is a dodge 'em up rhythm game, but in a way that I've never seen one done before. You are in a total 360 environment in a first-person perspective, and you use your mouse to move around and get your cursor to miss all of the different lines and ribbons of light that are flying around you. So it was a bit like a 3D version of Just Shapes and Beats or Sound Dodger. It took me a while to get used to the perspective shift and the fact that because you had full 360 up and down view of where you could place your cursor, actually sometimes you just accidentally wander into something and kill yourself. But I really like the concept of this. I just struggled myself to actually be any good at it. Next up is Rhythm Rabbit, and this takes block-based platforming into a rhythm environment, and this took a while for me to get used to it, but I think it's a nifty idea that, so long as the level design doesn't go too crazy, I think will be a real good meaty challenge for people. In this game you play as the rabbit, and every time the beat in the music of the song that you're playing in the level kind of drops, you move however many squares the carrots are around you, and it will be randomised. So it might be a 1 carrot leap to the next square, or 2 and you'll jump over something, or 3 or 4. And what you're doing is trying to use the environment around you to smash into a wall and then wait for the right moment where you can leap over, say like a river or a stream or an obstacle, so that you can then land safely on the other side. But the world around you is changing and being quite dynamic. So there was a level that was driving me up the wall where moles kept popping out of the ground. And so you thought you'd be going into one place where it'd be safe, but now it wouldn't. And so you'd have to quickly react of where you wanted the rabbit to jump to next, up, down, left or right. And your routes become narrower and narrower the more you muck about. So really interesting concept, has the potential to be an extreme frustration, but from the demo that I was playing, it seemed to tip the line just before it got to frustrating, and it stayed very challenging and therefore was kind of a pleasant surprise for me, this one. The next game is called Game Over, funnily enough, and this is a fourth wall breaking RPG adventure with rhythm action battles. And the rhythm action battles were really well put together. I think it was a 6-lane thing off the top of my head, but the idea was that each of the levels are trying different ways to distract you from the fact that it's just a pure rhythm action game. So long as you kind of keep your eye on the prize, you'll be fine. And the charts actually worked really, really well. Outside of that though, this game was trying its best to be fourth wall breaking and edgy, whilst also crossing the line for me between when something is being clever to when something is being annoying. And basically, as you try to leave the game, the main character won't let you do it because it's so upset that you're going to kill it. Because it's like, when you leave the game, I'll die. And I found that quite funny for a little while, but it kept on doing new and weird ways to stop you from leaving the game. And in the end, I got so frustrated with it, I just Control-Alt-Deleted and exited out. And so my worry with Game Over is you can make a point a few times and it will be interesting and funny and fourth wall breaking and makes you go, In the demo, it pushed it too far, and I worry that the game will probably do that over and over as a result as well. Next up is Sunday Morning, which is a solo dev 6-week mini project, and from that perspective I think they've done a great job. The idea behind this is that you're bored of having to tidy up and do your chores, so you turn on some music and therefore move around to the beat of the music, tidying up your house. But different things require you to pick up, say, the empty beer bottles and put them in the recycling bin, which then triggers a little Simon Says game with piano chords. Then when you go to wipe down the mirror in your bathroom, you have to kind of press the buttons as the chamois goes over the mirror. There's some really interesting, quirky little things here, and you've got 10 minutes to try and clean up as much as possible. My concern with this is that it doesn't teach you any of that, and you have to kind of discover it the first few times around what everything does, and then you can go for a high score challenge. I'm not actually sure what else this game does outside of the demo, and I feel like I've played the full game. So I'll be interested to see what this is when it releases. It's a bit rough around the edges, but depending on how well it's priced, would still be something that I potentially pick up. The next game on this list is the sole puzzle and music procedural generation tool game on this list called Kloppyssimo. And the idea behind this is that there are musical notes being spat out of these weird aliens, and you use various different weird synthesizers or percussive loops or bassline hits, and you place the different objects around the level to redirect these notes to get from entry to exit. But how you do that is entirely up to you. And so as you put them through like the mouth doors, as they're called, or the various different like kick drums or clap hats and things like that as you go, you create percussive loops that then means that you're building up a riff and a loop of music as you complete the level. But because there's lots of ways to try and do it and where you place these things, you get to create the music to some degree as you go. And I found the concept of this really fascinating, really engaging. And I started to muck about not wanting to complete levels because I was moving around the different synth triggers so that I could create different sounds and seeing how it all interacts. So from that perspective, never heard of Kloppyssimo before. Will be absolutely sticking it on my wish list and picking it up on day one, because this is one of those odd curveball games that no one will think about or talk about, and it deserves some love and attention. Moving on to more platformy things now, and we have B.I.R.D, or B.I.R.D, and this is a 2.5D platformer, but everything is rhythm based. And so as you need to jump over various different attacks, the attacks will come like to various different beats of the bar of the music as you're playing. So you need to kind of move around or jump or glide or flutter up the screen to try and avoid things. But what was interesting with this was, depending on how the music was playing, sometimes the tempo would switch, and so you'd then have to really kind of run through various different like really narrow platforming areas and be very precise Flappy Bird style before it then changed back to a different rhythm beat and then kind of progressed on with the level. It had quite a lot going for it in the 3 tutorial levels or demo levels that you played, and whilst it definitely had a rough around the edges feel, there's something really good here. And so again, just like every other game so far on this list, I've added it to my wish list and will be keeping an eye on it. The next game that I'll also be wishlisting is Rhythm Witch Beat Death, and this is if Vampire Survivors and the game remix had a baby, because this is very much like the game remix that I reviewed a couple of months ago on this channel. I adored that. I love this too. The idea behind this is you are automatically attacking various different monsters as you go around in these arena wave-based attacks. There are proper bosses at the end, so it's not as if you just keep going until you die. There are defined runs and routes, but everything is to the beat of the music, and depending on what weapons you put in depends on how many beats it takes for something to be charged up correctly before it then fires out. So you have to be precise and you have to be good, and once you've charged up your special attack, it will change from being 4 beats in a bar to 6, so you'll have to kind of swap tempos here and there. This felt like a really good base for a game to be built off of. I think I still prefer Remix because I loved the weird craziness of that world, but Rhythm Witch Beat Death definitely has big potential to be the rhythm version of a Vampire Survivors game if Remix hasn't already caught your attention. In a similar guise, Kill Beat is another game that feels quite similar to that kind of Vampire Survivors world, but it also isn't. This takes the pistol whip approach by making you shoot on the beat and reload on the beat, but you can move around off it. And so as you go around these various different grid environments that build around you, just like Bastion does, and I quite like that gimmick, I guess. It always feels quite satisfying as the world builds around you as you move forward. I initially struggled with this game because it felt like there were lots of disparate things not quite hanging well together, but as the demo progressed and more enemies came onto the screen and I started to get more of the game's personality, and I got more into a flow because there was more things to be doing and triggering finishing moves and stuff like that. I think I struggled with the keyboard controls on this, and if this gets mapped to a gamepad I'll be much more happier basically, because it feels like you're required to press lots of things that don't really sit well together on the keyboard. But yeah, this one, as everything else has so far, will stay on my wish list, but it was off to a bit of a shaky start and got better as it went on. Next up is Infinity Girl, and this feels like Super Monkey Ball on steroids because, and I almost debate like how much of a rhythm game this is, but it is, but it isn't at the same time, because what you've got to do is dodge all of the different obstacles that are in red as you roll your Infinity Girl ball down the hill towards the giant orb at the end of the level. They seem to be procedurally generated, although maybe not, because there's also online leaderboards for you clearing certain levels, so maybe there's a mixture of the two. But you can trigger jumps and boosts on the beat of certain things, but it seems really unclear as to when you could trigger those things and what you could do around them. As you clear levels, whatever coins you've collected would then trigger upgrades for you to then invest into, which was cool. But this felt very floaty and a bit all over the shop, and I'm not sure I felt like I was truly in control of my Infinity Girl as she flew down the hill. So I've kept it on my wish list, but I wasn't really sold on this demo so much, and I think it'll be more of a curio. Talking of curios, the only game on this list that is not on my wish list is Hypno. And this is a really weird one because it doesn't explain itself at all in the game itself, and it says you need to go and watch a 25-minute tutorial on how to play the game. No. So the idea is you've got these 4 cubes and more cubes are coming down the track towards you, and there'll be different colours, and you need to kind of connect 3 of the same cubes coloured together to then start scoring points. Beyond that, the actual mechanics start to get a bit confusing and not very well explained at all. And it was really difficult to see what was coming down the track towards you. And whilst I get that this is supposed to be a hypnotic event with lots of cool patterns, and the game does look quite cool, I was utterly clueless as to how this game was supposed to play and how I was being scored and what I was supposed to be triggering. It's really poorly built from a tutorial standpoint, and so I had one of those awful kind of friction off experiences where I didn't enjoy this at all, and so it's not stayed on my wish list, and sadly I really didn't understand it at all. Moving on to the last 3 games, and these were all quite unique. So the first one is Fleapit. Some fantastic voice work in this game before we get going. You wake up basically in hell having died, and then you're wandering around various different corridors in hell, beating various monsters. And because everything moves to the beat in the corridor, like very Crypt of the Necrodancer, you then need to attack various different enemies as you go along. But you've also got a tie that talks to you that's a demon, that means that you can trigger that and it will like pull you back to the entrance door and get you out of trouble if you wander into a difficult situation. There's all kinds of really cool stylish things here, and the gameplay felt good too. The only thing I'd say about it was that sometimes I didn't understand why I was getting hurt and why sometimes I wasn't, when I felt like I was doing the same thing. So there needs to be a little bit more cleaning up around how that works, but I was really impressed with the art style. The soundtrack was phenomenal and the voice work was superb too. This felt like a really well lived in world, and the type of thing that if anyone likes cutesy but evil demonic NIS style RPGs, I think you'll be at home here. Next up is a pure RPG called Fretless, The Wrath of Riffson. This game, superb. Love the art style, the music is excellent too, and then when you go into battle, because it's all around you carrying around your guitar, and then through upgrade shops you're basically pimping out and modding your guitar by putting on like tuners or metal straps that allow you to change the pitch of things, or getting different picks, or getting new guitar pedals which then amp up your stats. And what you then do is when you go into battle, your guitar is then charged with various different attacks or shields, and so are all of the different enemies. But the enemies are all different musical instruments. So the mushrooms have got handpans in them. So when they attack, they do like a little handpan thing and off it goes. As you strum your guitar, it then does like a little riff back. And then you charge up your guitar to then do crescendos, which then dive into a proper rhythm game as you go. Outside of that, I'm not sure how much rhythm action elements are here, but the entire game is built around musical themes, and it was an utter joy to play. So whilst not strictly traditionally a rhythm action game, this is music through and through, and Fretless really impressed me. Straight onto my wish list. This would be another day one, I think, for me. Last but not least, game number 20 is Keylocker, turn-based cyberpunk action. And I knew about this game beforehand because I found it on Twitter. Twitter is definitely my favourite place to find weird indie games I've never heard of, and it is an absolute treasure trove if you're an indie game lover like me. And Keylocker has a real mixture of turn-based rhythm action attacks and defences. I did find this game quite tricky to understand what I was supposed to be doing, but I love the art style, I love the theming of everything, I love the fact that at the beginning of the game you get to choose what type of musician you are, and then that gives you a class, and apparently that changes the story for you and you get different story beats as you go through the game. It feels like a really well-rounded world, highly stylised and very interesting to get through. Great soundtrack too. Just it needs some tidying up on the UI when you get into a battle so that you kind of understand all of the different options that you have, because I kept getting killed because sometimes I didn't understand what I was supposed to be doing, and that was in the tutorial, and then when I got beyond that it started to click a little bit more, but it still felt a bit fuzzy. However, there's clearly a lot of love that's gone into this game, and yeah, definitely on my wish list. I just would like to see a little bit of polish in that area first. And there we have it, 20 upcoming games from Steam Rhythm Fest, 19 of which have stayed on my wish list. You know I love a rhythm action game. You know I can't say no to most of them. I've said no to one on this list though. Hurrah! And yeah, I hope you've found something new and interesting to spark your rhythm interest. Thanks so much for watching. All take care, and catch you again here soon, hopefully on Higher Plane Games. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/HigherPlaneNetwork. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.